a video on this leftover vegetables from some vegetable stock. So I made some vegetable stock. I squeezed all the juice out of pureed the vegetables and then squeezed all the juice out of them to get as much stock out as possible, and as much stock and as much flavour. It's a little bit cloudy if you do it that way, but I'm not that bad. I'm willing to compromise a little bit of cloudiness for a better flavour, in all honesty. Now, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about making some butternut squash bread. And I was kind of thinking using, the idea comes from people putting potato or turnips in bread as a bulking agent. And I was kind of thinking, well, that's kind of quite interesting, so I wanted to have a go at that. And then I was kind of thinking about how to compensate for the moisture that's in the butternut, which you're going to have to allow for when you make the bread. And I kind of thought, well, that's kind of quite difficult because a lot of a vegetable is water. So, but you kind of don't want to lose that flavour in that water as well. So the more water you squeeze out of these vegetables, the less flavour is left in there, and the more goes into the watery stock. So I was just kind of thinking about that, and I was kind of thinking, well, and then I was also thinking about stock powders. And I'd seen a video on TikTok about this guy not wasting anything out of his vegetable garden, and he dried vegetable peelings and trimmings and those type of things, and powdered them and turned them into a powdered stock cube. I was kind of thinking, well, we've got this, let's just kind of have a play around. I really should weigh how much it weighs before we start. So let's just weigh how much this weighs, and then we'll see how much. I don't know what it was to start off with. Just out of interest, it's 236 grams. Then what I'm going to do is speed up the drying process. I'm going to put it on a sheet of baking parchment. I'm going to dry it out at work while the hot plates aren't at work. So we might as well use something that's on already. And what I'm going to do is we're going to squish it between two layers of baking parchment so it's flatter, and then as it's flatter it will have a larger surface area and therefore it will dry out quicker. But it's still like 2 days before I'm going to be at work, so what I thought I'd do as well is we'll just plan it out and leave it out somewhere, and then kind of see how it dries out kind of quite naturally without any kind of heat. Because if we're drying things with heat, that it's energy, and if we can dry something just in an ambient room, that would be better, wouldn't it? That we're not actually using any power, because although the price of fuel's come down a little bit, that's still no good enough reason just to use it for the sake of it. So that's pretty thin. So we'll transfer this onto a sheet, just so it's got a little bit more rigidity, and we'll leave that out overnight and we'll see what happens. And it should start to dry out. It's not a bit thicker than it should be, but hopefully it should start to dry out, and then we'll kind of see once we dry it properly at work in the hot cupboard. So that's dried out pretty well without even being in the hot cupboard. So the hot cupboard is just going to speed up that process. It's still a little bit rubbery there, but the outside there is getting dry, so we'll keep it in the hot cupboard for the next few hours, and it'll dry it out completely, and then we'll be able to smash it up and turn it into a powder and see what we can do with it. Right, so that's solid. We'll put it in the spice grinder and we'll grind it up, and then how's it taste? Bit cardboardy, in all honesty, but we know we can do it, so that's fine. But put it in a spice grinder, we'll grind it into a powder, and then we'll see what we can do with it. This is the powder that I have made from the dried out vegetables. So It's gone like that. Yeah, it's basically a vegetable powder. Now, it's not going to have much flavour because we squeezed all the juice out of it, and when we squeezed the juice out, we squeezed all the flavour out. So, what's it taste like? It's alright. It's alright. Doesn't. It's alright. There's nothing really much to it. However, so this was another experiment. This was me faffing around with butternut squashes and seeing how much water came out of butternut squash puree. So I did exactly the same thing, but with a butternut, and I didn't squeeze the excess juice out of it. I evaporated it off in the hot cupboard at work. At the same time, I was doing this, out of just interest, just to kind of see how much liquid came out of 150 grams. So this is a vegetable powder, or a vegetable flour. Vegetable flour, but flour as in like a bread flour, rather than a flour of a plant. And that's got loads of flavour. That's got loads of flavour, like you would. That's got loads of flavour. I mean, essentially what you could do is you could add back the water that we evaporated out of that. Say we, because we're all doing this experiment together, aren't we? It's not like the royal we, when I'm just talking about me. So it would reconstitute and go back to a puree if you were to add back the water to that. So it's not really a vegetable stock powder, because a vegetable kind of stock you would imagine would just be watery rather than like a vegetable puree. So if we were to add water to that, that would turn back into a puree, whereas a vegetable stock powder would just be vegetably flavoured and water without the bulk and the thickness to it. So I don't know what I don't think. No. Let's have another taste. Yeah, there's not any flavour to it because we squeezed all the flavour out of the stock. However, there's loads of flavour to that. So that's kind of quite interesting. That is a different way of preserving vegetables. And it tastes really good. It tastes really good. It tastes like milk powder. So milk powder's got that a little bit of a malty kind of flavour to it. It's got a bit of a malty flavour to that. And I wonder if that's the slight caramelisation of the. If we, I don't think I can slice. Yeah, I'll put the video in, part of the video in at the end of this, so you can see what I did with the butternut squash. But basically it's basically the same process, but it's slightly caramelised on the paper in the hot cupboard. Hot cupboard's about 80 degrees. So slowly over time you are going to caramelise sugars. So that may be where the malty flavour kind of comes from, because like in malted milk, because malted milk is it's got malts in it. It's got different. It's not just milk that's being caramelised. But so forget that. But it's got like a malty flavour to it, and it's quite delicious. People must use vegetable dehydrated vegetable powders as a seasoning. So to kind of, in the 80s and early 90s, people used to splash paprika on plates in restaurants, or on the top of an egg mayonnaise or a prawn cocktail. You'd put on paprika on the top. So people must have seen it, because there's no new ideas under the sun. But it's a different way of preserving. And and think in the same way that you preserve a fruit leather. So when you take a puree and you dry it and you turn it into a fruit leather, The only problem is that will never ever dry out entirely because of the sugar content of the fruit. So I don't think you wouldn't turn it into a powder. It wouldn't crystallize and turn into a powder. I think there's too much. I don't understand the science of it, but I don't think you'd be able to get a fruit leather to turn into a powder. Although that'd be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? So this is why I never run out of ideas of things to make videos on. So that's really interesting. That's a bit boring, can't really do anything with it. However, think about it, what we will do is we'll just add a little bit of it to, we'll just take a teaspoon of it and we'll just kind of show that by adding a little bit of, that's probably too much, but adding a little bit of water, we can turn that back into a paste. Just need something, I'm trying to avoid doing washing up. So we can take a little bit of water and this will turn back into a paste. So as you can see there, that turns back into a paste quite easily. So that's never going to be a stock. It's just going to get back to, it's not going to be like a stock cube. So we haven't really kind of made a stock powder. We've just made a stock puree. So it's just going to go back to that, which is, there won't be any flavour in that. No, there's no flavour in that. So, I don't know. Maybe no. I don't think that thought. I was just trying to think my way through something like I normally am. But thinking my way through things on a video just makes my videos far longer than they need to be. So that's not much use. It'll probably end up living in the cupboard for 6 months and then getting thrown away. Although if I wanted to bulk something out, thicken something up, that would be a way of doing it. So I could put that in a soup, and it would thicken a soup without kind of giving much flavour. So it'd be like a bulking agent. So you could put it in a bread, because like flour hasn't got any flavour. So you could put it in something like a bread and use it as a bulking agent without giving much flavour. That's kind of quite interesting, but I don't think I'm going to do that, because why would I make bread with that when I can make it with that and add flavour to a bread? And then I was thinking about something else. So I was thinking about the old Jack and the Beanstalk story, where the giant does the fee fi fo fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. I'll grind it. Blah 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 blah. I'll grind his bones to make my bread. So where does that come from? Where does grinding bones into flour to make bread? Where does that come from? Was bones, ground down bones, turned into a powder, and was that then used in a bulking agent in bread? I don't know. I'll have to do a bit of research on that. So anyway, so that's that. Kind of interesting, but not, and in a non-practical, interesting, but in a non-practical way. So we can't really do anything with it. But anyway, I'm waffling, and we're on for 9 minutes. That one should have just been a short video. But anyway, so that's that. Kind of quite interesting, but can't really do anything with it apart from use it as a bulking agent. So I could sieve it so it goes really fine, and then could probably put that in bread, and it would give an interesting colour and a little bit of flavour. But to save what, 30 grams worth of flour, you know, a little bit pointless. That's kind of quite interesting. I might have to think about that, because I made the bread out of the butternut. And what are you actually really saving? What are you actually really saving? That's interesting, isn't it? What are you actually? Yeah. So this is. What are you actually? That's an interesting thought. So they used to add things like potato and turnip to bread to bulk it out. but what essentially you're saving. So if you don't extract the liquid out of the puree, like if you're making potato bread, you use the water that's in the potatoes as part of the liquid that's going into the bread. But if you were to dehydrate the potatoes down to like just when they were just dehydrated, they were just a powder. So like 300 grams worth of flour, you'd put in 150 grams worth of potato. But if you dehydrate that potato, it goes down to about 20 grams. So are you only really saving 20 grams worth of flour? You know, in the grand scheme of things, because the majority of the potato is just water. So are you really bulking it out? Are you really saving anything? You're saving 20 grams worth of flour. Is that right? Is that right? Is that right? I think that's right. Like, why are you doing it? You're saving 20 grams. That's with flour. Are you? I don't know. That's the experiment, isn't it? That's the experiment. That's what potentially we can use those for. Okay. Yeah, that's another video. That's me waffling on far too long. I'll probably put this video because for my own records as well and my own kind of thoughts. That's kind of quite interesting. That's led somewhere interesting. So we can actually use that. We can use it not for the flavour, but because it is a vegetable powder. That's okay. Right, yeah, there we go. Actually, from my point of view, a rip-roaring success. So this is dried out in the hot cupboard, but it's stuck to the paper. So I'll have to have a go at getting it off the paper and hopefully not getting any paper coming off with it. But it's dried out quite well. So we've certainly made a butternut squash powder out of interest. So I'll be able to weigh that and see how it tastes. Quite nice with that. So I'll get it off there and then we'll weigh it and we'll see how much water is in 150 grams worth of butternut squash puree.